At 12:31 p.m. on Tuesday, April 14th, 2026, a silent alarm triggered inside the Bureau of Reclamation's Lower Colorado Regional Office. It wasn't a fire alarm, and it wasn't a security breach. It was a digital telemetry pulse sent from a depth of 1,040 feet below the shimmering, deceptive surface of Lake Mead. For the first time since the concrete was poured in the 1930s, the primary intake towers, those iconic Art Deco sentinels that have defined the American West's mastery over nature, recorded a hydrostatic pressure drop so severe that the automated systems began a hard sequence shutdown of the upper penstock gates. This is not a drill, and it is no longer a projected scenario. What scientists saw in last week's satellite gravimetry data from the GRACE-FO mission changes everything we thought we knew about the timeline of the Southwest's collapse. This is not a slow, multi-generational decline. It is a mechanical strangulation happening in real time. The red line engineers prayed they would never see hasn't just been crossed, it has been obliterated. We are looking at the functional death of the most important piece of infrastructure in the United States. Right now, as you watch this, the concrete throats that provide life-sustaining water to 40 million Americans across Nevada, Arizona, and California are gasping for air. The scale of this disaster is almost impossible to wrap the human mind around. We aren't just talking about a dry lake bed or brown lawns in Las Vegas. We are talking about the systematic failure of a coupled geophysical and industrial complex that supports the fifth largest economy in the world. The bathtub ring you see in the news, that 300-foot tall white scar of calcium carbonate on the canyon walls, is no longer a visual metaphor. It is a geological tombstone. When the water level dropped to 1,042 feet this morning, it didn't just hit a new record. It entered the physical kill zone, where the weight of the remaining water is no longer sufficient to push through the turbines at Hoover Dam. This is DEADPOOL. It's a term that sounds like a comic book character, but in the world of high-stakes hydraulic engineering, it is the sound of a civilization running out of time. At DEADPOOL, the reservoir is no longer a reservoir. It is a stagnant inland sea trapped behind a 726-foot tall wall of concrete that has suddenly become the world's most expensive decorative monument. But deep within the dam's classified structural blueprints lies the true horror. A series of emergency bypasses and low-level straws, so desperate, so expensive, and so quietly integrated into the bedrock that they suggest the authorities have known for decades that the end was coming. The question isn't how we fix it. The question is why, with all our technology and all our wealth, we are currently watching a $1.4 billion emergency straw reach into the mud of a dying river, hoping to suck out the last remaining drops of a dream that began in 1922 and died in 2026. My name is Daniel, and this is Natural Disasters, the DEADPOOL Reckoning. At 2:14 p.m. on April 14, 2026, the Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition (SCADA) systems at the Bureau of Reclamation's Lower Colorado Dam office recorded a phenomenon that had previously only existed in nightmare simulations: the onset of vortexing at the upper intake ports of Hoover Dam. As the water elevation dipped below the 1,040-foot mark, the physical weight of the reservoir, the hydrostatic head required to drive the massive Francis turbines in the Nevada and Arizona wings, fell below the critical threshold of 350 pounds per square inch. This isn't just a number on a gauge. It is the physical limit of the 1930s engineering that built the American Southwest. We are witnessing the mechanical death of an icon, says Dr. Sarah Vance, a senior hydrologist with the USGS, in a leaked internal memo from the Denver Federal Center. The turbines aren't just slowing down, they are eating themselves. When air is sucked into the intake tunnels along with the remaining water, it creates a phenomenon known as cavitation. Millions of tiny air bubbles implode against the steel turbine blades with the force of small explosions, pitting and melting the metal in real time. At 3:45 p.m., the vibrations were so intense that seismographs maintained by the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV, recorded a localized 2.1 magnitude seismic event centered precisely on the dam's Arizona site powerhouse. The chronology of this collapse is a masterclass in geophysical inevitability. In the year 2000, Lake Mead was virtually full, shimmering at 1,221 feet above sea level. By April 2026, that water column has been hollowed out. We have lost 181 vertical feet of water. To put that in perspective, imagine a 15-story building completely submerged, then slowly revealed as the lifeblood of the desert evaporates. But the technical catastrophe is deeper than the surface. Data from the Global Navigation Satellite System, GNSS, stations situated along the Black Canyon Rim show a startling geophysical response to this mass loss. Since 2022, the Earth's crust in the Lake Mead Basin has physically rebounded, rising by nearly 14 centimeters. The removal of over 20 trillion pounds of water weight, roughly 10 billion tons, has allowed the lithosphere to flex upward, a process known as elastic rebound. This crustal shifting is putting unprecedented stress on the dam's grout curtain and the volcanic breccia of the canyon walls it is anchored to. The dam is designed to hold back a specific mass, explains a lead structural engineer at the Bureau of Reclamation, under the condition of anonymity. When you remove that mass, the forces don't just disappear, they shift. The internal stress distribution within the 3.25 million cubic yards of concrete is changing. We are seeing microfractures in the lower galleries that haven't been touched by sunlight since 1935. Meanwhile, the monitoring of harmonic tremors deep within the reservoir's floor suggests that the rapid unloading of the Mead Basin is triggering slip strike movements along the mid-slope fault system. On April 10, 2026, the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program recorded a swarm of 30 microshocks in 24 hours. The message from the Earth is clear: the system is out of balance. The secret that keeps engineers awake at night is the 2015 completion of the Low Lake Level Pumping Station, or what the Southern Nevada Water Authority, SNWA, internally calls the third straw. This $1.4 billion emergency lifeline was drilled through 3 miles of solid volcanic rock to reach an elevation of 860 feet, nearly 200 feet below the DEADPOOL line where Hoover Dam stops functioning. Why was it built? Because the BOR and the SNWA knew the 1922 Colorado River Compact was a mathematical lie. The treaty allocated 15 million acre-feet of water based on the wettest decade in 1,200 years. The historical average, revealed by tree-ring data from the Laboratory of Tree-Ring Research at the University of Arizona, shows the river is a chronic underperformer. As of this hour, the third straw is the only thing keeping the taps running in Las Vegas, but even this engineering marvel is being throttled. The pumping station requires a massive 15,000 horsepower motor for each of its 34 pumps to lift water from the deep, sediment-choked bottom of the lake. But the power to run those pumps traditionally came from Hoover Dam itself. Now, with the dam's power generation down by 75% due to low pressure, Las Vegas is forced to buy expensive, carbon-intensive power from the regional grid just to pump the water that the dam can no longer release. It is a feedback loop of failures. Infiltrate Levant graded with vindication of the white varnish of Guli from self. In 1537 is reached the flash of self directly. In straightly one graded has reached that poor anestrating of self is reaching a temple with vindication of immediate lake. It is a feedback loop of failure. It is a feedback loop of seconds, but click now the Gevner. In straightly one graded хапрета дилектив гулі формас-продиктив від менедичинов і можної воклінія. Від формія вся дирейцій, і зоні говорять мені мордент, вигадає from this night and contractive with them. It is a fall of 3 million, with a prerdam product, it is issued with them for mishort. It is a long forced on the mind response, potentially beginning to divretso of no. In straightly one graded, it is a feel themselves most of the way force, by 70% 4 months of majestic, but with this powers navegas comfort them. It is a most 3 million, with the text of predictive self, what continue tripolitayet. It is a left one mind, it is a figiatush of self devota, with bigos coming to deck. In straightly one graded, белчение of деватах majestic пригитальной буладе. It is a видело какая video of перевер, под system to build ditment, for a showman partentify milesam. Infastrately, with the deal in Bilgenia Piro. The treaty allocated 15 million acre-feet of water based on the low 10 people ranik, is definitely поменtet фистинков, и дозаботан по питулях обишати, but the video булодих девать. Подфордит монеты чейсних, with the саботан меделит монеты чейсних, with the secret muveta, but the 15,000 horsepower motor based on the low 10 people from it. It is most от видео отвергивал, with the броктам утечения формасхортых. But вы делать, with видео помания. It is most от депрития, with the сагдина который тремененца ведет self, with the сагдимы чендисниким боут. It is a выделу какая видео в мачастик, with the сагдина который тремененца ведет self. It is most от сагдина который тремененца, with the стрейтнов агуради. It is лучше форме вообще делиться дната вдевать. It is most от декрития насажемый креатив, with the премененц форформиется, with the сагдина который тременен. It is стилшие за денег тепса, but матрите делоков мачастик. It is most от приглеменчеста, with the нихпати совна. With the доведилу какая видео в комприте, with the сагдина который тремененце, with the маблите да просто буладим. With the ведет self, with the ведет self амнамам, with the decision of девацев agents. Естелисный гордо ли форст, из паномном деле видео дведет self, with the белевайте зналочих, баделистват спекакода дведет self агим. With the ведет self, баделевайте зналочих, with the ведет self немалочих. Баделевайте зналочих пошло пи малочих, with the ведет self агим. With the ведет self девацев пошло пи кагрима, with the ведет self то похоть был адим. With the ведет self, with the ведет self трабуков. With the ведет self трабуков пробуках, with the ведет self. With the ведет self пробуков пошло пи. With the ведет self был адим. With the ведет self пробуков. With the ведет self скимплайнс, with the ведет self тра. With the ведет self набра проблеми, with the ведет self пробуков self милия. И с отпрития делая делит self, with the ведет self трау. Зади стороны лечей мы бизания. With the ведет self пробуков self разединца. With the ведет self трау. With the ведет self скимплайнс, with the ведет self скимплайнс. With the ведет self скимплайнс. With the ведет self пробуков self первер. With the ведет self скимплайнс. 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 Водоведется ли в Скинплайнс? 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 Вода ведется 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 ли в скинплайнс? Today, the Bureau of Reclamation will issue a Tier 3 shortage declaration, the first in American history, triggering mandatory 25% cuts to Arizona and Nevada. But as the GNSS sensors show, the canyon walls continuing to shift, and the third straw begins to pull up increasingly silty, oxygen-depleted water from the lake's lightless depths, the data reveals a terrifying truth. We aren't just running out of water. We are watching the mechanical and geological systems of the American West enter a state of terminal friction. Historical parallels in the American West are not merely stories. They are warnings written in the debris of failed dreams. To understand the 2026 crisis at Lake Mead, we have to look at the 1976 collapse of the Teton Dam in Idaho, a catastrophe that proved even the most advanced engineering of the US Bureau of Reclamation could be undone by unforeseen geological realities. But while Teton was a failure of internal erosion, Hoover is facing a failure of external reality. The Colorado River Compact of 1922, signed at Bishop's Lodge in Santa Fe, New Mexico, is what hydrologists now call the original sin of Western water management. In 1922, representatives from the 7 basin states, California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, split a river that they thought produced 18 million acre-feet annually. They were wrong. As of 2026, NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, has confirmed that the baseline used a century ago was a 500-year anomaly of extreme wetness. We built a civilization on a statistical outlier. The science of dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, at the University of Arizona's Laboratory of Tree Ring Research, tells a much darker story. By analyzing Douglas firs and ponderosa pines across the Colorado Plateau, scientists have reconstructed a 1,200-year history of the river. The data shows that the current 26-year megadrought, starting in 2000, is not just a dry spell. It is the most severe aridification event in the American Southwest since the late 1500s. Even more terrifying is the medieval megadrought of the mid-1100s, which lasted over 60 years and fundamentally restructured the indigenous civilizations of the Four Corners region. In 2026, we are not just witnessing a weather event, we are witnessing the return of a geophysical cycle that our modern infrastructure was never designed to withstand. The coupling of these systems is where the danger turns from hydraulic to tectonic. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USACE, Risk Management Center, has been quietly monitoring isostatic rebound, the physical rising of the Earth's crust as the weight of Lake Mead vanishes. When the reservoir was full, it held 26 million acre-feet of water, weighing roughly 35 billion tons. That mass physically depressed the local tectonic plates. Now, as that weight is stripped away, the crust is springing back. This isn't a theory. GNSS stations near Boulder City, Nevada, have recorded vertical displacement that is warping the very bedrock the dam is anchored to. This rebound changes the stress fields on the Lake Mead fault system. The USGS Earthquake Hazards Program has noted that this rapid unloading can trigger induced seismicity. We are effectively shaking the foundation of the dam by emptying the bucket it was built to hold. Statistically, the Bureau of Reclamation's April 2026 24-month study, the CRMMS model, paints a picture of systematic collapse. The model now assigns a 75% probability that Lake Mead will drop below 1,020 feet by next spring. At that level, the DEADPOOL status becomes a permanent state of being. But there is a twist that almost no one is talking about: the mud plug. The Colorado River was historically known as the Red River because of the immense volume of silt and sediment it carried from the Grand Canyon. Since 1935, that sediment hasn't reached the Gulf of California. It has been piling up behind Hoover Dam. As the water level drops, the concentration of this sediment increases. The third straw, Las Vegas's $1.4 billion emergency intake, is located at an elevation of 860 feet. But recent bathymetric surveys by the National Park Service show that the sediment floor of the lake is rising to meet it. We are reaching a point where we won't be pumping water. We will be pumping a thick, abrasive slurry of prehistoric silt that will shred the impellers of the Southern Nevada Water Authority's pumps in a matter of weeks. The forecast models from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography suggest that even a wet winter in the Rockies cannot save the system. Because the soil in the upper basin is so desiccated, 60% of the snowmelt is being absorbed directly into the ground or evaporating before it ever reaches the river channel. This runoff efficiency collapse means the Colorado River is dying at the source. The system is coupled, the cycle is repeating, and the physics of the 21st century have officially overridden the laws of the 20th. We are no longer managing a resource, we are managing a retreat. The human cost of DEADPOOL isn't measured in statistics, it is measured in the silence of a dry tap. On the morning of April 14, 2026, Elena Rodriguez, a lead operations engineer for the Southern Nevada Water Authority, SNWA, stood inside the cavernous underground vault of the low lake level pumping station, the third straw. At 48 years old, Elena had spent half her life managing the flow of the Colorado River into the Las Vegas Valley. But today, the telemetry wasn't showing flow, it was showing friction. I grew up in Henderson, Elena says in a recorded briefing for the Nevada State Emergency Management Agency. I remember when the water was so high you could jump from the cliffs into the deep blue. Now I am standing 600 feet below where the surface used to be, listening to a $1.4 billion machine choke on the remains of a river. The sound she is describing is the cavitation of the 15,000 horsepower pumps. As the water level in Lake Mead dropped to 1,038 feet, the concentration of suspended solids, prehistoric silt and manganese, spiked. The third straw was designed to drink from the bottom of the lake, but no one anticipated the bottom would be a thick, abrasive slurry. By 10 a.m., 3 of the 34 pumps had to be taken offline. The impellers, made of high-grade stainless steel, were being sandblasted from the inside out. For the 2.3 million residents of the Las Vegas metropolitan area, the impact was immediate. This isn't a scenario where the water just stops. It's where the pressure fails. In the master-planned communities of Summerlin and Sky Canyon, residents reported brown water and air hammering in their pipes. But the crisis quickly transcended plumbing. By noon, the Clark County Department of Environment and Sustainability issued a Stage 4 emergency declaration. This is the water reckoning. 600 miles away, in the scorched fields of Pinal County, Arizona, Marcus Thorne is watching a third-generation family legacy turn to dust. Marcus, an African-American farmer whose grandfather moved to Arizona during the Great Migration, is seeing the Dust Bowl 2.0 manifest in his own backyard. Under the Tier 3 shortage protocols triggered by the Bureau of Reclamation, Marcus's allocation from the Central Arizona Project, CAP, was slashed to zero. The CAP Canal, a 336-mile concrete artery that cost $4 billion to build, is now a dry, sun-cracked scar across the desert. We are not just following fields anymore, Marcus says, standing in a field of withered Pima cotton. We are abandoning the land. The USDA is estimating $65 billion in crop losses across the Southwest this year alone. But you can't put a price on the topsoil blowing away. When the water goes, the ground literally loses its grip on the planet. FEMA has already begun setting up dust mitigation zones along I-10 to prevent the massive multi-car pileups caused by haboobs, giant dust storms, fueled by the tens of thousands of acres of abandoned dry farmland. The impact on the US power grid is perhaps the most terrifying coupled system failure. Dr. Julian Chen, a grid reliability expert with the Western Area Power Administration, WAPA, in Folsom, California, explains the black start nightmare. Hoover Dam isn't just a power plant, it's a giant battery that stabilizes the Western interconnection, Chen explains. When the water level hit 1,038 feet, we lost the ability to provide frequency regulation. The grid in the southwest is now shaking. It's like trying to drive a car with a bent axle. At 1:15 p.m., a cascading failure began. Without the steady, massive inertia of Hoover's spinning turbines, the surge from solar farms in the Mojave couldn't be balanced. A localized blackout hit Phoenix, Arizona, where the temperature was a record-breaking 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Without air conditioning, the urban heat island effect turned the city into a kiln. Emergency rooms at the Banner University Medical Center were overrun with heatstroke victims within 2 hours. The logistical and telecom collapse followed the power. The massive data center clusters in Mesa and Reno, the brains of the American digital economy, require millions of gallons of water per day for evaporative cooling. When the municipal water pressure dropped below 40 pounds per square inch, the automated cooling systems for 3 Tier 4 data centers failed. Fiber optic nodes began to overheat. For 6 hours on the afternoon of April 14th, high-speed internet and cellular service across the southwest flickered and died. The smart cities of the desert suddenly became islands of silence. The ecological toll is a tragedy of extinction. The razorback sucker and the bony-tailed chub, species that have survived in the Colorado River for 3 million years, are facing total localized extinction as the remaining water in Lake Mead becomes hypoxic, stripped of oxygen by the concentration of organic decay and rising temperatures. In the Lower Colorado River Multi-Species Conservation Program, LCR-MSCP zones, biologists are conducting emergency salvage operations using helicopters to airlift thousands of fish to hatcheries in Nevada and California. The USD damage figures are staggering. The DEADPOOL event has wiped an estimated $1.2 trillion of the real estate value of the Sun Belt. In Las Vegas and Phoenix, the Great Migration has begun in reverse. Families who can afford to live are loading U-Hauls and heading north toward the Great Lakes region, creating a water refugee crisis in states like Michigan and Wisconsin. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been deployed to the Arizona-California border to manage the logistics of water distribution as the Imperial Valley, the nation's salad bowl, faces a total seasonal shutdown. This is the reality of a coupled system failure. The water didn't just disappear, it took the power, the food, the internet, and the economy with it. As Sarah Littlefeather, a water rights attorney for the Hualapai tribe, noted during an emergency hearing in Washington, D.C., "We told you the river was a living being, and you treated it like a bank account. Now the account is empty, and the bank is collapsing." The geography of the American West is being rewritten by the arithmetic of a drought that doesn't care about your property lines or your Art Deco monuments. By the summer of 2027, the DEADPOOL status of Lake Mead has transitioned from a national emergency into a permanent geophysical reality. The first anniversary of the 2026 collapse passed not with a bang, but with the steady rhythmic sound of heavy machinery. In the scorched silence of the Black Canyon, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation has officially designated Hoover Dam as a passive structural barrier. It is no longer a power plant. It is no longer a water regulator. It is a 726-foot tombstone for an era of hydrological hubris. But the risks are not stabilizing. They are spreading across the American West like a tectonic contagion. The USGS has now deployed an additional 200 high-precision strain meters across the Basin and Range province because the isostatic rebound we discussed in 2026 has triggered a secondary geological crisis. The removal of 25 trillion pounds of water has caused the mid-slope fault to unstick. In March 2027, a magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck just 5 miles from Boulder City, Nevada. It wasn't caused by plate tectonics in the traditional sense. It was caused by the Earth's crust physically expanding upward, unburdened by the reservoir that once held it down. This crustal warping is now threatening the integrity of the Palo Verde nuclear generating station near Wintersburg, Arizona. As the largest power plant in the United States, Palo Verde is the keystone of the Western interconnection. It doesn't sit on a river. It relies on treated effluent, reclaimed wastewater from the city of Phoenix for its cooling towers. But the math of 2027 is brutal. As Phoenix's water supply from the Colorado River vanished, the volume of wastewater plummeted. By June 2027, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission issued a notice of unusual event. Without a guaranteed 20 billion gallon annual supply of cooling water, the plant's 3 reactors are facing a mandatory thermal shutdown. If Palo Verde goes dark, the power grid from El Paso, Texas to San Diego, California faces a structural deficit that no amount of wind or solar can bridge. We are looking at a permanent brownout state for 30 million people. The vulnerability of the United States logistics corridors is the next domino to fall. The inland empire of Southern California, the massive warehouse and rail hubs in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, is the throat through which 40% of all U.S. imports flow. But this region is entirely dependent on the Colorado River Aqueduct. In late 2027, the Metropolitan Water District, MWD, of Southern California recorded zero flow at the gene pumping plant for the first time in history. Without water for the workforce, for the cooling of automated sorting facilities, and for basic fire suppression in these massive timber frame warehouses, the logistics chain has snapped. The Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach are seeing a 60% reduction in throughput because the inland dry ports are functionally uninhabitable. The ecological endgame is even more sinister. The Salton Sea, located in California's Imperial Valley, was already a brewing environmental disaster. But as the Colorado River water stopped flowing into the valley's irrigation trenches, the runoff that sustained the sea ceased. The water level is dropping 6 inches a week. As the sea recedes, it exposes thousands of acres of playa, a toxic dust composed of a century of agricultural pesticides, arsenic, and heavy metals. NOAA's National Weather Service has issued perpetual dust warnings for the Coachella Valley. The PM 2.5 levels are so high that the South Coast Air Quality Management District has declared the region a permanent respiratory hazard zone. This is the Salton sink becoming a toxic engine, driving tens of thousands of internal migrants toward the Pacific Northwest and the Great Lakes. In Washington, D.C., the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has shifted from disaster response to strategic retreat. The National Water Contingency Plan of 2028 includes the phased abandonment of agricultural zones in the desert Southwest. This isn't a political choice, it is a thermodynamic one. You cannot grow food in a 120-degree kiln without a river. The third straw in Las Vegas, that $1.4 billion engineering marvel, is now a dry pipe. The lake level has dropped below 860 feet, entering the dead silt zone. The Southern Nevada Water Authority has officially mothballed the facility. Las Vegas is now surviving on a closed-loop emergency recycling system, but with the population fleeing, the tax base to maintain that system is evaporating as fast as the water. This is the finale of the American dream in the desert. The data, the tree rings, the satellite gravimetry, the hydrographs, and the seismic strain meters all pointed to this moment for 50 years. We ignored the arithmetic because the concrete was so thick and the neon was so bright. But the Colorado River does not negotiate. It does not recognize the 1922 Compact. It only follows the physics of a warming atmosphere and a depleted snowpack. As we look at the satellite imagery of the American Southwest in 2028, we don't see a natural disaster. We see a landscape returning to its original arid equilibrium. The bathtub ring on the canyon walls is no longer a warning. It is a permanent record of a temporary civilization. The pumps are silent, the turbines are still, the data has spoken, and it says, the water is gone, follow the signs, respect the physics, the clock has stopped. This was Natural Disasters.